I'll be sharing some experience which I've got in React. So
Do you
this is
want
in
this one?
continuation to the sessions that we are having for React JS. So this is the part 2 session. Okay. So let's start with the basics of the frameworks and libraries such as AngularJS and Angular as well as React. So uh, if so the basic problem which most of the frameworks face is how to detect the changes in the application. Okay. So what happens is framework needs to know that some changes are happening in the application, and once it knows the changes would be rendered in the browser. So this is the one of the most important issue that is faced by many frameworks, including React and Angular. So there are two solutions for change detection. Either we can automatically detect the changes, which is also called dirty checking. So this is basically what Angular does. Okay, and a second technique would be to that the user notifies about the change. Okay, so if you see on a high level, the first approach would be very computationally expensive, because there would be some like a timeout thing that for each particular time frame, the framework would check the data, compare the data, and then again, make those changes visible in the UI. So let's compare how the automatic change detection is done. So the automatic change detection is basically done by in Angular as well as in AngularJS as well as in Angular using Zoom.js. So the change detection is basically triggered when there are some DOM events like click events or user interacts when the user interacts with the UI. The second trigger would be AJAX request callbacks like success error callbacks. Third would be timers, set timeout and all that. And fourth one, applied edges. So this would be applicable to the AngularJS thing. So as you can see, AngularJS or Angular has to do a lot of checking to actually detect that some changes has happened. But in case of React, if you see, so in case of React, if you see, and even in the case of Vue, the triggers are so basically in these two frameworks, the user notifies the framework that some changes happen. So that is done through set state method, and second is force update. Okay, so these are the two methods through which user notifies that the application has some changes has happened in the application. So if you compare both of these two things, you will easily come to conclusion that in AngularJS a lot of work has to be done. So there are four things that Angular needs to check. There are DOM events they need to check, AJAX requests, timers, and the applied edges cycles. But in case of React, there are only two things through which the changes are done. One is through set state and force update. So in this case, React has clearly an advantage over Angular or AngularJS. Now, the second important issue that is faced by most frameworks is how to manipulate the DOM. Okay, so and obviously DOM manipulations are very expensive. If you directly try to mutate the DOM element every second, it would take a lot of time. So how does React takes care of it? Okay. So basically React uses virtual DOM. Okay. So that is basically an in-memory representation of the actual DOM. So all the updates are basically batched together and then the updates are made. So that has a performance improvement there, and it has a diff algorithm which actually compares the in-memory DOM with real DOM. Okay. So the so basically the so if the leftmost tree, if you see, that is the in-memory representation of the DOM. Okay. So say suppose those three nodes, there is a set. So for these three DOM elements, say suppose there is a set state method called. So that makes the particular DOM element as dirty, and all the child nodes are then re-rendered. Okay. So basically, what happens is React is basically making changes in memory instead of making the DOM. So once it knows that this particular DOM has been changed, it directly replaces that DOM. Okay. So that is, if you say comparatively to other frameworks, it's quite fast. But the issue is here. Say suppose the parent element has got changes, even the child elements would get re-rendered, right? So to fix that issue, you can just implement the shoot component update lifecycle method, and inside that you can have the logic to compare the two sets of data and check whether the data actually needs a re-render for that component. So that you can do with the shoot component update lifecycle. So this virtual DOM concept is unique to React. Okay, Angular doesn't have virtual DOM basically. So this is another advantage that React.js gives to you. And also the DOM comparison has a time complexity of ON. So that is quite good. So basically it does level by level comparison of nodes, and once it gets to know that a particular node has been changed, it directly replaces that node and its child nodes. So why virtual DOM is helpful? So basically, as I said earlier, that the updates are batched together. Okay? And once the React knows that the changes are done for that particular life cycle, it then does the repent and reflow of the particular DOM elements. So that is basically done only once. So then again, there is a performance improvement happening there. Also, React has unidirectional flow. So as you see, the data flows from parent to the child. Okay, and in case of events like click events, that goes from child to parent. So since there is a particular flow happening for the data, that gives an advantage because it's very less error prone, because that the data will only flow from top to bottom, not from bottom to top. And it's really easy to debug because again, that the direction of the data is flowing from parent to child. And any changes that you make at the child level don't propagate to the parent level. So if you face any problem at a particular component level, only that particular component and the sibling, and the child components you need to check. So basically, it doesn't affect the parent and sibling components. So that has an advantage there. So these are the two basic, reasons that wherever you would go, you would find these reasons that React is beneficial because it has unidirectional flow and it has this virtual DOM and all that. But apart from that, React has a very important thing in there. So basically, React promotes functional programming. So basically, if you see, the question should be actually why React.js or functional programming, because React.js actually has some, so it provides an environment where you need to program through functional programming. So I will just share some statistics that I found in Google Trends. So this is from the last 5 years. So this is the comparison between functional programming JavaScript and object-oriented programming JavaScript. Okay, so you can see in the trend, the interest of functional programming is growing and growing from last 5 years. So this is done through Google Trends, and this is the time frame for 5 years. And this is a comparison based on regions. So we have most searched. So this functional programming tool is mostly searched across Canada, UK, Germany. India is Still stuck with object oriented. Okay. So why functional programming? Okay. So functional programming basically it's more concise because if you see mostly if you program through functional programming, you are able to the coding structure is like that. You will be able to grasp easily what is being actually programmed. It's more predictable because mostly functional programming promotes pure functions. So in case of that, the state of the application is more predictable. Okay, and it is easier to test because again it has pure functions. So for a particular set of input parameters, you will always get the same output. So that makes the testing possible. So we will cover these topics, how this affects React. So these are the basic pillars of functional programming as well as React. So we have pure functions. So pure functions are functions where if for a particular input type you will always get the same output. Okay. We have functional composition pattern, and we basically avoid the avoid sharing state. We avoid mutating the state, and we avoid side effects. So we will go one by one through each point and explain how this this particular thing is used in React. So first we will cover pure function. So as I said, pure function, given the same input, it would always return the same output. Okay, and it has no side effect that it doesn't make any network request, it doesn't mutate the data. Okay, it doesn't have IO requests being made like file access and all that. So basically, it just if you give a particular set of parameters, for that parameter it will always give the same output. Okay? So what advantage does it give? If you follow this pattern, it will make your application immediately testable. You can write test cases. So basically, this is because, as I said, you know that for this particular set of inputs, you will always get the same output. So that makes testing possible, writing test cases possible. It is easier to refactor. Again, you can just improve the code because using the composition pattern, you can just go on improving your code. It can always be cached again because it has for same input you are always getting the same output. So in the second computation phase, you can just return the cached data. So that caching becomes possible with pure function, and you can run your code parallel. Okay, so we have this web workers and all that in HTML5 that you can use. So if there is any heavy computation that is being made, you can just move that code to web worker instead of doing it in JavaScript. Okay, so these are the advantages that you get in the pure functions. So this is basically a concept of functional programming, and this is promoted as in this is heavily used in React. So that's why it's very important that you know these concepts. Okay, so one of the important things that you need to be aware is that there are certain functions which are pure and certain functions in JavaScript which are not pure. Okay, so in the first part, if you see in the leftmost code, we have the access variable, and we have its array value as 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, and I use the slice method. Okay, and it gives me output as 1, 2, 3. Again, I use slice. It is giving me same output with same input. So first input parameter were 0 and 3. It's giving me the same output. Even in the second case, it is giving me same output. So this is basically a pure function, and this should be used in your React applications most of the time. The right code, if you see, we are using splice method. So in splice method, it is basically mutating the data. So it is not returning a new data all of the time. So in first call, it is returning 1, 2, 3, and in second case, it is returning 4, 5. So basically, this is actually mutating the data which is an anti-pattern in functional programming. So this particular slice method should be avoided when you are doing when you are coding in pure functions or in functional programming. So yeah. So this is one example of pure and impure functions, but there are again many functions that, so you can just Google out and avoid using those methods if you want to make your programs testable. Yeah, you can create. So basically, to create pure functions, you need to make sure that you are not mutating the data in that pure function. You're not making API calls. You are not using set timeout and all that. So basically, in pure function, you need to make sure that for a given input, same output is given. Okay. So in that case, you would be able to write test cases. Again, this is another impure function, math.random. So I have called this method 3 times, and obviously its usage is different, but this is just an example. So basically, this such type of code shouldn't be in your pure function or selectors and all that, because again, if you write these methods, you won't be able to write test cases. Yeah, you can actually, but again, so this is just an example. So math.random, you have set timeout and all that. These are just examples that you shouldn't be using if you are writing pure functions. But again, yes, there are some hacks that you can do and make sure that you are getting always the same data. So in React, pure functions you can write through React.memo function. In some ways React.pure component, but that basically depends on how you write the code. Even in case of pure component, you could mess up, you could make your state dirty. So, but in case of React memo, it is basically made for that purpose, pure function, and you can write obviously selectors. So selector is basically belongs to the. It's not actually part of React. It's basically a reselect library, which through which you can write selectors. So basically, in selectors, you write the business logic and all that. So most of the time, you try to write the business logic in components containers. So that should be avoided. All those business logic should be written in selectors. So if you move that business logic to selector, then your code would be reusable, and you can reuse your code basically. So let's move on to the second pillar, functional programming pillar, which is function composition. This is a very important pillar in React as well as functional programming. So basically, functional programming is like one input gets passed out to the other function as a one output is passed as an input to another function. So this is basically part of the curry function where you have only one functional parameter, and you keep on building the chain and compose the particular object. So this is one example where in the first, this is a +1 function which is incrementing by 1, and there is another function +2 which is incrementing by 2. So basically what is happening here is we are not mutating the state of A, okay? We are actually returning a new copy each and every time, and at the end, if you see, in the third line, you can see we are composing +2 bracket +1 bracket A. So this is the composition pattern which is followed in React using high order component function. So I will give you some examples regarding it, so you will get a very better idea. So this is not a unique thing. So if you have worked in Unix, Linux, you would be well aware of the pipe function which we use. Okay. So even in the pipe function, one output is given as an input to another command. So functional composition is quite similar to this pattern. So basically, we also have inheritance So why would you use composition pattern instead of inheritance? Because in inheritance we have tight coupling of data. Okay? Because the the child class would have access to the parent data and all that. And child class can mutate the data of parent class. So if that mutation happen, other child classes would get impacted. So and obviously there is duplication. For each new functionality, you would keep on inheriting new stuff, and you would just again build a mess around it. So basically, this brings to the inheritance, the gorilla banana problem. What you want is a banana, but basically you are getting a gorilla holding a banana and the entire banana. So this is the issue with inheritance that you get. So in React, if you see, inheritance is mostly avoided most of the time, and React basically promotes composition pattern using high order components or render props. It has also the React.children.map. So this map method is different from the array.map function, because in array.map function it doesn't take care of as you see, components can be string, components can be array, and if you do map over the these components, map function will throw error. So that's why React has created its own map function. And if you want to map over a list of components, this is the method you need to use. You have the clone element, which is very important when you try to compose your functional components. And also we have the compose library. So we will come back to this thing in the later slides. So we have this normal inheritance approach, which we basically use. So we have the base button, which extends from component. Again, if you want the enhance button, you just then again extend the base button. So this at the leftmost side is the normal inheritance approach that we use, and in the right hand side you can see this is the compositional approach. So again, the base button is passed as an input to enhance HOC, and again that output is again passed into the super enhance HOC. So this basically makes your code concise. At looking at it, it's making sense. Okay, but there is some issue with composition. So once you try to enhance a component, the composition pattern will shift to the right continuously. Okay, as you see, initially we had only one HOC, then we have two HOC, then we have three HOC. This builds up, and it is not looking concise. So for this issue, you can use the recompose library. So you can just compose the components one after another. So basically in this case, as you see in the compose method, the parameters would be executed from right to left. So first the base button would be passed to enhance HOC, then the output would be passed to more enhance HOC, and that way you would compose the enhance button. So this is the composition pattern which is followed heavily in React. Again, a very important advantage of compositional approach is, say suppose you want to make a shopping cart and you have these shopping cart items, right? So one approach would be to directly pass the items array in shopping cart, okay? And we have the on item click handler. The issue with left hand side code is, there is a readability issue. It's not making sense what is happening. And we also have the tight coupling issue. Like if you want to add additional click handlers, it is really not possible, because we have only one click handler which gets cloned on each of the items in the left hand side. And say suppose if you want to add an additional expandable component in the left normal approach, it's really not possible. Now take a look at the compositional approach which we are doing. So we have the shopping cart, shopping cart element, and inside that we have the shopping cart item elements. So this code, if you see, it's more concise, it's more readable. In case if you want to add handler for the egg shopping cart item, you can just add an on-click handler there for that particular cart item, and it will just work. And if you want, say suppose for a particular item you want a expandable component, you can just replace that cart item with that expandable component. So the rightmost compositional approach, it is feasible through, as I said in the earlier, so that the rightmost thing can be achieved through react.children.map and react.clone element. So these two methods can be used to create a compositional uh, component like this. Now we would go to the third important pillar, which is avoiding shared state. So this is very important. So basically, if you have a shared data which is shared across multiple components, and both components are trying to mutate that data, there will be race conditions. Okay? So yeah, a lot of time we make API calls and all that, and the API call response is not ordered. Okay? So once in some cases, first API response will get dragged down, would come after the second API response. So that race conditions can happen. We also have timing and order, timing and order of function issues. So that can cause a lot of bugs. So I'll just give an example of, so that is very simple example. Say suppose there is an variable x which has a value 2, okay, and we have a function x1, x2. X1 increments the value by 1, and second function just multiplies it by 2. Okay, so now say suppose there are two async requests that are being made. It can be anything, set time or it can be API calls and all that. The order is very important here. X1 is being received first, and then X2 is being received. So obviously the value would be 6. So 2 is plus first incremented by 1, which is 3, and then 3 is multiplied by 2. So this is very fairly simple problem. But what happens if this particular async request 2, if you received it before async request 1, so that will basically change your output. So many a times what happens if you make two simultaneous API calls, the second API call response might get executed first. So in this case you are getting the value 5, which is not correct. So this is very you can just use await and all that, but then this is just a fair example just to explain how you would get into issue if you are directly trying to mutate shared data. Yeah, correct.
But in the React, Redux, you mostly use the shared data.
Correct, that is shared, but Redux has the principle that reducers are pure function, and in reducer you never mutate the data. So since you are not mutating the data, it's fine. You can just share the data. But if you are mutating stored data, it would make the state messy. So that's why if you see in the Redux principle, reducers are always pure function, and reducer will always return immutable data. So that is the reason why Redux follows that pattern for this exact same reason. So now how do you solve this problem? So now in this method, what I'm doing, in the previous method, I was directly mutating the value of 1, value of 2. Okay. Now in the second example, I'm using object.assign. You can also use other libraries for this, but for this purpose, I'm using object.assign. So now what is happening is x1 is returning a new reference, new value for x. Even in the case of x2, it's returning a new value. So now what happens? If I am making any async request, the value will always be 2. This is very simple. I mean, I'm just using object.assign, and I'm not assigning that value anywhere, and it's basically not mutating the data of val. So obviously you would get the value 2, right? Even if I get the response out of the order, I will always get the value 2. Now the thing is, now you would get the idea of functional composition pattern. So if you use the compositional pattern, you would always get the same output. So what I'm doing is I'm passing the variable x to x2, and then I'm forming a chain of methods. So this is a basically a unary composition pattern. So if there are multiple requests being formed, you would always compose the method such way that no two multiple API requests would have separate outputs. So this has an advantage. So basically, what can we do for this shared data thing? We should avoid mutating the data, and we should always follow the composition pattern of functional programming. Uh, so basically, React promotes immutability. You know, sorry. Okay, so let's go to the fourth pillar, which is avoid mutating the state. So this is just a text that I have got in one of the articles. The true constant is change. Mutation hides changes. If you are continuously mutating the data, the whole history of the data would be gone, and you won't be able to do time debugging and all that. Hidden changes manifest chaos. It manifests bugs and all that. So it's wise to embrace system. This is just a text. Okay, so why state mutations? Why would we avoid state mutations? Because if we do state mutations directly, you won't be able to write such code in your shoot component update. What I'm doing, I'm just checking the reference, right? Dot value is not equal to dot value, next state dot value. If I had mutated the data I would have to add for loop and all that, and I have to check the child properties and all that. So here I'm just checking by reference. So that gives an advantage if you don't mutate. And most of the cases in React, if you do mutations, your component won't be working properly. So anyways, you won't be able to write such code, mutate the data in components. So how to avoid state mutations? Basic. These are not React specific. You can just use object.assign, object.create, immutable.js, immer.js. So immer.js, I think that is quite recommended at least because it's very simple to use. So this is a better alternative to object.assign immutable.js that you use in the reducer if you are using Redux or in the component. So basically what object.assign does is it allows you to mutate the data and it internally maintains a draft of it. Okay. So as you see in the image, you have the current state. It also has a draft state. So all the edits are gone to the draft state and a new object is created by Immer itself. So you don't have to use object.assign immutable.js. And basically immutable.js, if you use, it has a big learning curve. Right. Right. So in spread operator basically doesn't do deep copy. So that is one reason that you won't be able to use spread operator. So like spread operator, even in case of object.assign, it does shallow copy. So if there are nested properties, nested objects, you won't be able to clone that because if there are nested objects, the reference is copied. Okay. So that's why if obviously that question is very valid because you can use spread operator if your data is not nested. If your data is nested, then obviously you will need to use immutable.js or Immer. Okay. So usage is quite simple. You have the produce method, and in the first parameter you pass the base state, and second is actually a function which is passed with the draft state. Okay, and all the updates as you can see, we are directly mutating draft state here. Okay, but internally what Immer would do, it would always return a new object for this. Okay, so as you can see, you would get the advantage of directly mutating the data, and obviously internally Immer is handling all the creation of new object and all that logic. So it's very easy. I mean, it's very concise to see. If had you used object.assign, your code would be looking messed up. Right? Even in case of spirit operator, it doesn't look good. So you can just try this library. It's very good. So this is the last thing, last pillar of functional programming, which is avoid side effects. So what are side effects? Side effects are basically if you are accessing file, if you are making network requests, if you are using set timeout, set interval. So all these are side effects which should be avoided in the React components area. All this code should be moved to the services. Okay. The advantage you get is you can make your code testable. You can write test cases on your selector, you can write test cases on your components, but you won't be able to write test cases on an API. You can write, but then it's it's a lot of work that you would need to do, and it's not really recommended approach to test these flows. You can't test reading a file, right? I mean, how can you write a test for that? So side effects should be moved to some other component, some other file, like a service. This is one example service, but you can write some other, writing some other file. So basically, functional. So these side effects are out of the scope of functional programming. So you shouldn't be having it in your code in React area. So what about ES6 classes? We have the classes, right, in React. So if we are talking all about functional programming, we still have classes. And if you see in the React documentation, you would always see the class examples. So why we are talking about functional programming? So I hope you are aware of this person, Dan. He's a very active contributor to the React community. So basically, this point we had highlighted like 5 years back, that ES6 classes are not awesome. So he had some issues with that, and he highlighted in this article. So basically, he's just not recommending the usage of classes, and this is 5 years back. So how would you avoid classes? So there are some 4 points that he made. If you really need to use class, don't inherit twice. Like, don't create nested hierarchies. Just have a flat hierarchy. Don't use super keyword. If you use super keyword, then you are breaking the functional programming principle. Because with super, then you can again mutate the base class data. Always write components as pure functions whenever possible. You can also use React.memo for that. And you can always extend through React.component class. But then there's a lot of things that you can you need to follow. Or there is an alternative. You can just use React instead of ES6. Okay. So this is a basic architecture which we have followed in one of the projects here in React. So basically, what is happening? We have so as you can see, this page 1 to n containers. So basically, we are following Dux pattern architecture in current project. So for each page, we have a separate folder. Okay, and for each of those, and the components related to that page, you would always find inside that folder. So it's very easy to locate if there is any new person joining your team. You can just, and if you want to make a particular change, add component or update a component in a particular page, you just go into that folder, and inside that folder you would find all the code. Okay, he doesn't need to mess around looking at different folders. So that advantage you can get, and you need to make sure that the leaf level components are pure or memo components. Okay, so what is happening here is suppose user clicks a button or makes any action, that event is passed to the action creator. Okay, and once the action is dispatched, it is intercepted by middleware. Okay, middleware can be anything. So we have currently used Redux logic, but you can use sagas, you can use observables, you can use thunk. Okay, you can also try this Redux logic, which is gives a base of all the libraries. So it has taken some good things from observables. It has taken good things from sagas, and it has created a new library around it. And it has a very small learning curve, so you can use that. Redux. So this middleware, you know, interacts with the services. So all the mutations, API calls, file access things that I was talking earlier, you can move that logic here. Okay. So this any logic you put in services, you don't need to test. You don't need to write test cases for that. Then middleware interacts with the services, makes the API calls, and then it sends the data to the reducer. Reducer then updates the store. Okay. So in the reducer you can use immer to make sure that the data is not mutated. And once the updates are made in the store, it is exposed to selectors. Selectors are basically the reselect library. So basically all the business logic, like fetching the data, once you get the data from store, obviously you need to make the data consumable by the component, right? So component has a particular format in which it exploits the data. So all that logic you can have it in the selectors. And the most important thing about selector is you can write test cases for this here inside the selector itself. You don't need to write test cases for components. You don't need to write test cases for containers. Once you have your test cases for the selectors, everything you can make sure that you can be sure that everything is working fine. We have a lot of testing libraries like Jest and all that. But I would recommend a Writeway library. So the Writeway library is fundamental thing is that in case of Jest, we write test cases for components, right? So according to it, it's not right. As per the library, you should write test cases for the business logic. Okay? If your business logic is working correctly, fine, then your component will obviously render your data correctly. So then the selectors data is consumed by the container, and then container drills down the data to the child components. Okay, and then the whole cycle repeats again. So this is a architecture that we had followed. You can follow your own architecture, but make sure that you are following the functional programming principles. Don't mutate state. Don't don't write impure functions. Right? Try to write pure functions. All that. Yeah. Sorry, which? That basically depends on the the library which you are using. Okay, so if it's a sagas, if you see sagas basically is an event based. You write take those methods and all that. So that is basically that depends on the library which you are using. Okay, there are a lot of libraries which you can use. I think so. Yeah, I think I'm done. Any questions? So,
Hey, Anirudh, Dhairya here.
Still wondering about what is
yeah.
they have heard about this composition model, but they
Yeah, so composition, basically you can think, if you have worked in Linux, the simplest example is the pipeline thing that you write, like cat file name pipeline, then you write the commands and keep on writing pipe, and one command's output is played as an input to another command. Same pattern is followed in in the composition pattern. So the advantage of it is that it's a unary thing. Like if you write this code in a asynchronous way, you will always get the same output. It's not like one function will be executed later or after. So that thing is ruled out in the functional programming. So that advantage we have.
I have one question. You said that service layer API we should not write side effecting, we should not write the test cases.
Right.
But those are being used in Redux level or those might be being used in So if we want to write test cases for that observable API or the Redux level API, then how to write, like is there any mocking kind of stuff on it?
Yeah, you can actually mock up the API response and write test cases for that. But just look into the Rightway library. It has actually a whole page written on the exact same thing that you are talking. That whether we should write test cases for these functions, the API calls and all that. So as per that, and I truly agree with that article. In that article, it is mentioning that you shouldn't actually be writing test cases for such functions, because if there are any changes in the API, then again you need to rewrite your testing logic and all that. So yeah.
I think the whole logic behind using reselect is to split out the business logic from the reducer system. Because a lot of people try to use business logic and try to code in reducers.
Right.
So what reselect does is it takes away that part from the reducer itself and put it in the reselect. So that's why you are writing tests for the selectors, not the reducers. And the reducers are pure to don't need to write tests. And that is what makes it very effective.
So one more doubt I have, like at a time only one reducer will get executed because it is changing the store, right? And store should not be immutable. It should be immutable. So what if two reducers are like, is there any case that the two reducers are executing simultaneously? Because say I come from the backend Java backend perspective. So there we have to take care like this. Like if we have multiple CPU, is there any case that two reducers can?
See, the thing is that two reducers might try to update the same data. Okay, that might happen, but again, that is ruled out because mutations are not happening. We are not mutating the data. We are always creating a new object all of the time. Again, that race condition can happen, and it's on to the programmer himself that is no two reducers are accessing this same data. So that is on the developer himself. If he is actually trying to do that thing, it won't make sense. And if you see in the Redux, we are actually using the combine reducer thing. Once we are instantiating the store, we are using the combine reducer method. Okay. So basically, what it does is it just there are a lot of reducer functions that you write, and it just combines that functions into one object. Okay? So that's why we are having that combined reducer thing. And in that case, if you have two, reducers one after another, always the second reducer will have the updated data, right? I mean, it will overwrite the data. So that is the. So yeah, you can write that case, but that is onto the developer. Yeah, so anyone remotely joined, those who have remotely joined, any questions?
Hey Anirudh, I have posted it in group chat. When to use ES6 classes and when to use React hooks, like according to production code that you Java developers do like on daily basis, what's used
Okay, so
and why?
we have one question from Dhairya. Like when to use ES6 classes and when to use React hooks. What's used in production code and why on what basis? Okay. So yeah, basically React hooks was basically designed for the same purpose. So previously in the class-based system, we had to follow in some cases we had to follow the inheritance approach, which is which is a anti-pattern. Okay. So yeah, in production environment, you should try to migrate your code. If you already have, you should try to migrate your code to hooks, because that actually truly follows the functional programming principle. and React is all about functional programming. It shouldn't have the classes thing happening there. And the other reason why hooks was developed is because obviously classes had life cycle methods. Functional components didn't had one, so that's why hooks was really important to create. And the article which Dan had written like 5 years back, so it was actually highlighting the same issue. I will just return to that slide. Yeah. So all those issues, if you see, so those issues are correctly highlighted by Dan, that you have the prototypical inheritance. You inherit from base class. You can directly access all the public methods of base class and all that. So and obviously he has written that the inheritance should obviously be preferred. Composition should always be preferred over inheritance. So yeah, I think in production you should be using hooks if you truly want to take advantage of functional programming. I think so. The area is that. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, sure. Thanks.
Okay, I think. So any further questions from remote locations? So I think, okay, then I think we can wrap this session. Okay. Thanks a lot. Thank you.